Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talking Trees Live. It's Wednesday, and I'm so excited to be here. We're here every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, talking trees with your favorite arborists from around the country. And I'm really excited to welcome in Frank Molina from our Long Island office. Hey, Frank.
Hey, Katie, how are you?
I am great. We were just talking about the weather before we hopped on. And one of the things we love to do is ask the attendees who are watching to tell us what their weather is like in emojis. So I know you said you have a teenage daughter, so you're probably very familiar with emojis.
I am.
So I would put a sun with like a little bit of cloud over it because it could not be more of a beautiful day here outside of Philadelphia. How about you?
I put a full sun, Katie. I think I have not seen a cloud in the sky. So, no, I'm full sun all the way.
Full sun, gorgeous. This is the weather we live for. You were joking in spring because this is like it's like in the 70s here today. It's beautiful.
Unbelievable. Beautiful.
So let's show us your emojis. We have Cynthia tuning in. So, hey, Cynthia, let us know what the weather is like where you guys are. And if you want to tell us where you live too, that would be fun. Frank, we get people from all over the country, sometimes international, tuning in. So I know. So today we're going to talk about a really interesting topic. You know, if you've seen any of the talking trees in the past, you know I am anti-volcano mulching. Frank, it's something that I will pull up to landscapers and tell them to pull it back. Or I will do it myself, guerrilla style, in parking lots because it's something I find so important. But today, what you're sharing with us is called 5 to Thrive. And that's a fancy way of saying summer tree care. You know, there are things that we can be doing for our trees in every season. And certainly fall's a great time to plant trees. Winter, we do dormant pruning. Spring, I guess everything happens in the spring. But summer is a really important time for tree care as well, especially in our regions where and this is happening all over the country, trees are suffering from drought. So there's just so many things we can do for our trees in summer. And that's right now. Happy summer solstice, by the way. We're in it.
Yes, we're in it. A few days into it already. Yes, yep. Absolutely.
So we're going to cover that. So first, let's learn a little bit about you. So you are newish to Davey, but you've been in the green industry for over 25 years, right?
That is correct. That's correct, yes.
And all in the New York area?
The New York metro area, absolutely, yeah. 25 years doing from grounds management facilities, but always been in arboriculture and horticulture, so yes.
Awesome. And tree care maintenance now, I mean, you obviously love trees. You've been doing it for, gosh, you know what? That's a quarter of a century. When you put it that way, doesn't it seem like such a long time?
Yeah, I just aged myself, didn't I? But yes, I have been doing it for a quarter of a century. Absolutely,
yeah. So you must love trees. Was this something you grew up? Did you grow up loving trees?
You know, I did. I think I loved more the outdoors than anything else. And once I became a little bit more involved in the care of trees, I really found that it was definitely a passion of mine. And I have the best job in the world, and certainly the best office in the world, even though I'm currently inside a building, but my office is in the outdoors, and not many people can say that.
I know. That is true. I sit at a desk all day. I wish I could be outside. That is a much better job. Although can't complain right now. So, all right, let's jump into it. And we want to hear from you guys too. We want to know what your questions are about your summer tree care, because particularly I know a lot of areas are suffering from storms. In fact, Ryan is saying right now, spotty thunderstorms, overcast and hot in North Florida. So we've got Central Florida, North Florida, Ohio. Everyone's tuning in. So we've got storms, lots of questions about tree care. But let's start with 5 to Thrive. So we'll run through, as you guys think of your questions, what those 5 important things are. So you were just telling me number 1 is soil. So what is the most important thing? Why is our soil so important?
Well, it's extremely important. And folks always think about the trees and they look up. Everyone looks up. Everybody looks at branches. Everybody looks at the tree. And they fail to realize that it all starts down at the ground level, or should I say below ground. Yeah. In reality, what's the major supporting structure of a tree, structurally and as well as for life, is the root systems. And that's all in the soil, correct? So compacted soils is probably one of the worst things we find in our root zones. And those are the type of things that you really can't see with the naked eye. Those are things that we know go on. Well, how you might say, well, we play on our lawns, we play baseball, throw the frisbee around, we walk back and forth, and even the simplest things as mowing our lawn create some compaction in our lawns. And so those are the things that people don't realize, but we want to encourage and we want to put that out there to say, listen, we need to make sure that our soils are good, they're not compacted, they're allowing our roots to thrive, to be able to absorb nutrients and water. And ultimately, that is our main structural point. That's what holds our trees erect and in place. So treating compacted soils is probably one of the biggest ones, I would say, just in soil in general, but certainly one of the biggest ones, the five to thrive.
And even when you visualize new construction, you think of all the equipment that's driving over there, taking off some topsoil, compacting that soil. So even if you don't have kids, you're not walking on your lawn. It's likely that your lawn, if you've never done anything about it, your lawn may be compacted, or the area particularly around your trees. But you just said it's needs for the roots to thrive. What is it about compacted soil that doesn't let the roots thrive?
Compacted soils, as you can imagine, doesn't allow really the flow of moisture, water. If you ever notice during a really heavy storm, you look on the side of the road and you'll see where it gets to the point that soils are saturated and water is actually shedding off and running off, or sometimes just so saturated that when you walk, you see water kind of almost like a sponge, right? They reach the saturation point. Well, it's the reverse with compacted soils. Compacted soils don't have enough spores or air pockets to allow water to percolate to the roots, and the roots use the moisture to absorb, again, water certainly through the tree, but more importantly, nutrients out of the soil. So by having compacted soils, that's restricted, and therefore your trees suffer.
And I found this great, I know it's a little small, but this great image that I think displays exactly what you're saying, Frank, is that when the soil is compacted, look, those roots don't have those air pockets in which to grow. And what are they going to get when they can go further? Like you're saying, more water, more nutrients. So when the soil's compacted, where do they go? Well, I think they sometimes do this, right?
Yeah. So what ends up happening there is all the roots concentrate on the top, and you'll start to get, certainly the tree tries to react by putting out these little feeder roots on the top, and they start to do this sort of twirling, or what we call curling roots, which creates a secondary problem.
Yeah. So we'll get to girdling roots in a minute. All right. So 5 to thrive. The first thing is soil. And P.S., a lot of these things have to do with the soil, because we can't stress enough how important not just tree care, right, Frank? It's all plant care.
It's all plants.
Really starts in the soil. I've heard it said over and over again, you can put a $1 plant in a $10 hole. So, you enrich your soil. A $1 plant will survive, but you can't put a $10 plant in a $1 hole. That plant probably won't last. So really important to make sure you have the healthy soil. So besides, well, how do we then, if our soil is compacted, what do we do?
Well, there's treatment options, certainly. You can reach out to your arborist and get a little bit more information. But some of the things we do is something called vertical mulching, where we'll actually come into the area and we'll go usually around the drip line or a few feet from the center of the trunk, using horticultural tools, an air spade and a compressor. And we'll actually go in there and sort of, I think a homeowner once told me this, fluff up your soils. And that's kind of what we do. We go in there and we actually create these sort of cavities within the soil, within the top, usually 12 inches or so. And we'll incorporate usually some amendments in there. And we actually till and soften that soil. So we're allowing and incorporating, again, those air pockets that we need so much, so that these roots can actually spread out sideways, but more importantly, downward, reaching down for some nutrients and easier uptake for water and nutrients. So that's one of the things that you can do to help the compacted soil situation.
Awesome. So compacted soil is number one. Healthy roots is number two, really, like ensuring that you have those healthy roots. And then number three, we're talking about nutrients. So, number one, compaction relates to the ability for our roots to get those nutrients, but those nutrients aren't always present in our soil, right?
Right, they're not. And so it's a very good point. So what do we do? Well, what we can do is try to reincorporate some of those nutrients back in the soil. And that goes to the next sort of key factor, which would be fertilization. Our trees lose a lot of a lot of nutrients in the soil for various reasons. Some of them, they're not maintained too long in the soil. They leach out of the soil. Sometimes other chemicals or other surrounding plants are binding up some of this nutrient, whether it's absorbing and taking away and starving certain key plants. But in general, again, sandier soil certainly leaches out. So by reincorporating some of these nutrients, we can never do exactly and mimic exactly what Mother Nature has intended to, but we certainly could reincorporate a lot of these nutrients in there. And I just mentioned to you earlier about compacted soils. Well, guess what? The way we do fertilization, we could actually help out and break some of the compacted soils as well, as per your slide over there. That is typically the way the Davey crew member will go out and actually fertilize that tree. We go in there with a probe that's typically somewhere between 4 to 6 inches. Usually we can gauge that so we don't hit any irrigation lines or utilities. And we actually drive that spike in there with some pressure and directly import this fertilization of these nutrients into the critical root zone. So we're doing two things at that point. We're fertilizing and reincorporating nutrients. Certainly it's soluble, so there's moisture and water in there. And more importantly, again, we're breaking up that soil and allowing a little bit more of this airspace that we keep talking about in compacted soils.
Amazing. Two things in one. And I love how in this picture, particularly, you see where it's happening. So it's happening. I mean, that tree obviously has a big drip line, but the drip line's not fully mulched. So the arborist is pulling it out because those tree roots, I think there's a misconception that tree roots just go down, 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 but they actually spread really far and wide, right?
Oh, absolutely. Tall tale sign was typically that it was down to, out to what's called the canopy, or the drip line of the canopy, right? Which is typically the branches, the extent of the branches. But we've actually learned that sometimes it's 2 to 3 times the length of that. So it really is a big root zone. But and those are, again, great soil conditions. A healthier tree can do that. But we certainly will extend way more than, or at least try to be within that drip line. In some suburban areas, we can do that. But certainly some urban areas that is not possible. We do incorporate enough nutrients within allowable space.
Yeah. And then we know, because many of you have watched this before, but the fertilizer is not just important, but it's mulch. So this tree has a nice mulch ring around it. Talk to us about the importance of mulch in putting nutrients. I mean, there's so many things mulch does, but so you tell us.
Yeah, well, you touched on the volcano police over here. It's a very good point. Mulch has a lot of great properties to it. Excessive mulching, like volcano, certainly is an issue, and I think people have become educated in that, and hopefully you're staying away from that and telling their landscapers not to do that. Yep. But the properties of actually mulching, there's several. One of the things that's great about mulch is the retention of moisture. By mulching your critical roots, you're allowing more moisture to be retained and slowly percolate to the important feeder roots. You're allowing the actual eliminating runoff. So water will actually, almost like a sponge, the mulch will actually hold it and slowly percolate into the root systems. It shelters them from wind. So sometimes exposed roots can actually get dried out. And those are the top feeder roots. And if they're drying out, then you'll see symptoms up on the tree. So it covers and protects our roots, keeps the weeds away. Probably one of the more important ones. People like their mulch beds to look nice and clean and underneath their trees and their tree rings nice. And guess what? It actually also helps with control weeds. Yeah. So there's a lot of good and important elements to having a nice mulch tree or mulch tree ring. Other than aesthetics. And let's be realistic. It looks great, doesn't it?
It does. I know. It looks great. We expanded some mulch rings in our backyard because we had some baby trees and they grew, lo and behold. Mm-hmm. So we just doubled the mulch rings this year. And it's amazing how crisp and clean and beautiful it looks. It needs some weeding, though. So don't come out here today. And it does also, another question I was going to ask you earlier about compaction is, so do we just not walk on our lawn? I mean, because when you're talking about mulch, I was thinking, what the mulch does? It prevents people or lawnmowers or weed whackers from getting too close, but we still can walk and play on our lawns, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, when we mention compacted soils, these are optimal conditions for your tree. And certainly if there's some cases that we can, prevent from, using the same sort of trail and walking day in and day out around the same exact pathway, we can eliminate some of this. you get compacted soil sometimes from just rain. Hard rain can compact your soils. Doesn't mean we stay away from it, but certainly wherever possible, we can stay away as much as possible. We can certainly do things like the vertical mulching, aerating of lawns underneath trees. Believe it or not, actually help both the lawn and the trees. I love the mulch rings because it also keeps, much to what you were mentioning, it's a deterrent from lawn mowers and string trimmers from getting in there and harming the base of the tree, which can be a whole set of other problems if we get into having wounds or defects on the tree itself. So there's, again, the benefits are tremendous.
Yes. Love it. All right. So we've covered really we've covered compaction and nutrients and soil and healthy roots and a bunch of things. Remember, this is 5 to Thrive. So we've looked down. Now let's start to look up in one of the next numbers, which I think we're on 3, but is pests and diseases. So summer, as much as we love the sun and the heat, so do our friends, the bugs. So is this a time when most of our bugs have hatched and they've emerged?
A lot of them have, absolutely. The timing of it, typically they do thrive. There's certainly different insects that have different life cycles and sometimes have 2 to 3 generations or maybe even more. But absolutely, the heat typically does allow for more pest activity, right? So there's a few things that we can do as arborists, and any arborist can really batten down the time frame using, we can get technical, but it's called grown degree days, and we could try to figure out when these insects or critters will hatch. We can have an idea of when, not only when they hatch, but certainly certain species where we know certain insects and diseases come, and then and back to the time frame, certainly. So yes, this is the time that you're getting a lot of that activity. You're getting a lot of pests and a lot of diseases and funguses, and again, your expert arborist should be able to help out with that and deter some of this. Sometimes you need treatments and treatment options, and sometimes you can just do things preventatively, whether it is a treatment preventatively or culturally. Culturally might include things like certainly adequate moisture, good mulching, fertilization, getting a healthy plant. A healthy plant or a tree will actually be able to fend off a lot of pests and diseases on its own. So if you have a healthy tree and you've been able to incorporate some of this other stuff we just talked about, you can certainly deter some of this. Some cases you can't do that at all. Pruning is another option. Certainly thinning out certain canopies of trees, allow more movement of air and sun, filtered sun, helps with certain pathogens, funguses, as well as pests that we know, like those sort of close quarters, stagnant air, no airflow. So those are things that we want to be looking out for, and certainly an expert to help in that.
Yeah. We got a question before we jumped on that someone said, is it true that humidity can help breed diseases? I mean, we all know about mold, and other things. When it's humid and hot, mold will grow, or dark. Is that the same for trees, or does the hot weather kind of kill those?
No, it actually, it really does. There's certain fungal diseases that thrive on the humidity. Everybody kind of sees, the roses, right? Roses are typically one of the things that usually will have, powdery mildew and black spot. This is all related. Certainly anthracnose on dogwoods and those sorts of diseases are all fungal and are, thrive in humid temperatures, typically in the summer, of course. And so, yeah, this is a perfect example again of things that you really can't prevent. You can try to either be preventive and treat, do some cultural treatments, or of course, calling in an arborist and helping out with some of this stuff. Sometimes you have no choice but to actually treat.
Yeah. And the important thing that you can do as a homeowner or a tree lover is go out there and look at your trees. I think, Frank, one of the things that I notice is that people have tree blindness. They see these big, beautiful trees and they think, well, they've been here long before me and they'll be here long after me. But you need to go look at them. So right now we have spotted lanternfly. I don't know if it's on Long Island yet.
According to the map that we've seen from the USDA, if I remember right, they've had some spotting here in Nassau County, Long Island, but we have not seen it as you have, obviously, in Pennsylvania. But I've been, studying this pest for a few years now. And so
Yeah.
it is not a fun critter, is it?
No, it's not fun at all. And right now, when they get to be adult stages, they're bright red and you can spot them easily. But I've asked my neighbors, have you seen all the spotted lanternfly nymphs? No. Like, how can you not see them? They are lining my rose bushes,
Yeah.
but people just don't go out and look. So I think it's really important to just, once somebody said to me on Monday, like, I just spend 10 minutes in the morning with my cup of coffee, walking around, looking at my plants. Now, I know that's like a garden lover. And if you have that time, many of us are really rushed in the morning with kids and just work. But if you do have that time, take a look. Now is the time for your trees to thrive. It's number 3. Go out and look at your trees, inspect them, see what's new and what's happening with them.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that this pandemic has done is people have kind of stopped and smelled the roses, right? Cliche, but it is the truth. I think people are finally getting with it and slow down a little bit when it's able to enjoy some of this stuff. And yes, look up. People typically look ahead, look down, but nobody really looks up. And look up. There's symptoms that you're going to see that you can be able to tell. Just, you don't have to be an arborist. You can say, that doesn't look right. That's strange. That color's not right. Why is that tree wilted? Wait a minute. That branch has no leaves.
Yep.
Those are all tall tale signs. And certainly look up, look at your trees.
Yep. All right. Number 4 in our 5 to thrive is talking about physical damage to the trunk. So we already talked about this a little bit when you said one of the reasons you love mulch is because it protects the lawnmowers and the string trimmers. But, do deer, what are some other animals that might hurt our trunks or anything that would be damage to the trunks?
Yeah, you mentioned a couple good ones, right? Deer. Everybody always sees, sort of the buck rub on trees. Certainly, if you're impacted by deer in the area, some people, rabbits tend to chew the base of certain trees or plants and shrubs. I've actually seen quite a bit of this in the region where woodpeckers, sapsuckers, woodpeckers. They will tend to create havoc on the trunk of trees, typically fruiting trees, apple trees. And those are things that we always, that in some cases with the woodpecker, typically it's not something of major harm, but certainly buck rub, rabbit, or even our mechanical damages, right? The mower and the string trimmer, those can be detrimental to trees.
Yeah.
Those are the ones we worry about. We talked about the mulch being a deterrent. That's the first thing I do when I go to a property. I try not to push and say you need to remove your lawn from the base of the tree. But in reality, it should be. Trees and lawns weren't really meant to be together. If you go to the forest, there's no lawns underneath the trees there, right? And so they weren't meant to be in there for a reason. It certainly looks attractive. I love the look. But what happens is we have to service those lawns. We have to cut around them. We have to weed whack and use the string trimmer. And what that ends up happening is creating a wound to the tree. Not only is it creating a wound to the tree and it's aesthetically unpleasing, but more importantly, it's creating a wound that's detrimental to the health. It starts to cut in some cases into the vascular system of the tree and stopping the flow of water and nutrients up to the canopy, up to the leaves, right? And so that becomes a huge problem, and you can actually have fatality from that. Some trees will not show it immediately. A lot of trees will actually show callus wood at the base of it. But with time, it certainly can be a huge issue to a tree, detrimental. Some cases, it's almost immediate. In some cases, it could be years down the line. But keeping them away, keeping those lawnmowers, keeping those string trimmers. I tell folks all the time, there's some people that, again, I did say it is attractive. And I just met a client yesterday. I said the same exact thing. You know what? I understand you're not going to go and do textbook. Let's mulch to the drip line. How about you give me a foot? Give me a foot from the trunk.
Yeah.
Let's get this deterrent so that no one's coming in there with the weed whacker. You got a foot. And use any kind of mulch. You can use a stone mulch. You can use wood, natural wood chips or wood mulch, anything that that's good for the tree that provides a barrier, and at the same time keeps again is that deterrence of this equipment getting in there and damaging the trunk.
Yeah. And then you mentioned deer, buck rub, and rabbits. So what mulch is not going to keep them away? cage trees? What are we doing for animal damage like that?
So it varies on the type of tree. Usually on the young trees with buckrub, you can actually go out and whether it's us or someone else, can go out and what we do typically if it's a smaller tree, 4, 6, 8 inch, maybe a little bit more, you can buy things as deterrents like perforated pipe that you would actually slit up and put, 5 or so feet of the trunk, and that is a deterrent. We've used burlap, kind of wrapping around trees, young trees, doesn't harm them. Again, the same thing as a deterrent. Typically, what will happen is if you're having that done and you're doing that to your trees, they go to either the next tree or the next person's property. But those are the type of things that we try to do is, again, the deterrents. We talked about the mulching. We're talking about now physical deterrents is like putting this perforated pipe around a trunk or putting burlap around it or fencing. Deer fencing works. But deer are like any other creature, right? If it's a hard winter and they need to get to something, whether it's the rub or they're trying to get to your fruit or browse on your plants, and they'll browse on trees as well. They're gonna hop a fence unless it's like a 10-foot fence.
Yeah.
But again, these are deterrents. They do tend to work, but it's not 100% foolproof.
Yep. They say, I haven't counted, but more deer than people here in the county in which I live in Pennsylvania, Chester County. So I know you have a big problem in Long Island too. They're everywhere. And so I think everyone knows it's not going to be fully deer proof, but anything we can do to deter them, and protect your trees, particularly young trees, as you just mentioned. Like, I think the older trees can withstand if they're healthy. You said it before, but I think it's worth repeating. If the tree is healthy, if you've fertilized it and mulched it and it's well watered and, it's got a healthy root system, not compacted soil, we could go on and on, but it's going to be more likely to withstand a few hungry deer in that really cold winter, than it would if it's got some pests and diseases or fungal issues.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we've made it, I think, yes, to number 5.
All right. Drum roll.
Yeah. It's just about routine care and maintenance. So we've talked a lot about the things that people can do to keep 5 for Thrive, but what are some routine care tips that you have for homeowners during the summer?
All right. So tips during the summer, I think one of the bigger things we've covered the major ones, I think, but certainly one of the more important ones is maintaining adequate moisture levels. In the summer, a lot of folks tend to forget vacations, other life events, and we forget about our trees. Typically trees that have been planted within the first, let's say 3 years, but even then trees that have, been in the ground 5 to 10 years. And sometimes even trees that are very, very older and mature, they will show signs of drought. So part of keeping a healthier tree is really making sure you're keeping that moisture level adequate, certainly during extreme heat and extreme summer months. So moisture is certainly one of the key points there.
Go on. I have a couple moisture follow-up questions.
Sure.
Should we put like a watering schedule? We've talked on this show a bunch about every day a new tree, every day for a week. I never remember, every week for a month and every month for a year. Let's just say that, I've heard a couple different variations of that, but keep your young trees well watered. But is it important to put our established trees on a schedule if we know that we haven't had rain for a while?
Absolutely. All those things are great, but in reality, every location is going to be different.
Yeah.
Every soil is different. The conditions are different. Young trees, particularly, you can water, every day, every other day. You could put 5 gallons a day. I mean, it varies, right? What I always say to folks is it is going to take a little bit of time if you're going to do this yourself. You go out there and really get your hands dirty. If it's a young tree, get in there, rake away or pull away some of that mulch, get in there and get a good grip of soil. I always do the old ribbon test. You essentially go in there, you make a bit of a mud patty, and then you kind of squeeze it together in between your fingers. That mud patty kind of in the center, and then it kind of squishes out on either side of your fingertips, right? And then see how long it holds for. If you let it go and it's held and it holds for a while, you're probably good. You're probably at a good level. Same thing if you put it in your hand, it holds there together nicely. You're not squeezing water out of it because it can be too much. You're good. If you go and you do the ribbon test or you're doing the patty test, And guess what? You open your hand, and as you open your hand, it crumbles in your hand. You probably don't have enough moisture. So getting in there, getting wet, and then you're going to play with that. You're going to go in water maybe on a Monday, and you're going to do your test on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and kind of find out Thursday you're dry again. So guess what? You're probably going to be watering every 3 days. Then of course so now you have an idea what your site is requiring. And then of course the weather, right? If it's extreme hot, it might be less. If there's rain or storm, then it could be you probably don't have to worry about it for weeks. So getting your hands dirty and getting in there and looking at that soil.
I love that. And put your kids to work. Make them dig in there and do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mud patties are the most fun part of summer. And then what about watering it? I know volcano mulching is my biggest pet peeve, but my second biggest pet peeve is when I see people with a sprinkler hose, just watering the leaves. Watering the leaves. So when you say water, how would somebody water properly?
Very, very good point. Yes. Watering doesn't mean wetting the trunk or wetting the leaves. That's a misconception. People feel that when they say watering their plants, they water the leaves, and the leaves miraculously, the moisture on the leaves miraculously get absorbed nutrients, and all these great things happen to trees. That's not what happens. Watering means what we just talked about, the soil, right? Getting in there, getting your hands dirty, getting in there. It means getting the root systems wet, and that means getting down there. If you have a wand or a hose, you're watering the base of that plant. In some cases, of course, it might erode. You have it on too fast. You might have to sprinkle it on, douse a little bit. You hit a little bit, you turn away, you hit it a little bit, and let some of that moisture get into the ground. But that's what you want to water is the roots and the roots only. Can you cool down the leaves and wet them? Yeah, you could. Not going to do much. In some cases, it might do more harm. Actually, yeah. So
I always wonder, because I definitely do a slow trickle of the hose and I just kind of leave it there and then I'll move it to my next tree. But I know the drip zone is so big. So ideally, would we be using a sprinkler, or how are we reaching the whole drip zone? Or is it not that urgent? As long as the tree is getting some watering of its roots in this part, it covers the rest of them.
well, some water is better than none, of course, but more importantly, what you want to do is, again, you want to get that root system. And in some cases with trees, you can't get the full mass of the drip zone. Drip zone systems like automatic irrigation systems are actually work well, but it really all goes back to the person that's managing it.
Yeah.
If you're watering well, if you're testing out your soils and making sure you get enough water, so you're manipulating the amount of time. Like you mentioned, that the erosion, right, is an issue. As you mentioned, slow trickle of water. That's great. You're actually letting it percolate slowly into the soil. That works well. Some of your basic home brought soaker systems that you'll actually wrap around the base of certain trees, that certainly works as well. But it really does. It's only going to work as good as you are at managing it and maintaining it. But that's what you want to do, is water the root zones and get as much moisture as evenly spread out as possible.
And so watering is such a big topic, particularly in the summer. When our trees are showing the signs in the leaves, is it almost too late? I mean, I know we want to water, but if the leaves are turning brown, or if the tree is wilting and it's a big tree, is it too late? Or are there signs in the tree, like a house plant, that you can be like, oh, time to water?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Certain trees will give you that. Certain trees will give you a little bit of a wilt appearance, and you kind of, sometimes it's hard to detect, but you will see a little bit of wilting. You say, oh, you know what, that tree's wilting. Let me get a little water on it. So it'll give you a sign. Some trees will actually start to lose leaves. So you look up and you'll see green canopy, but you'll see some leaves falling. You're like, where are these coming from? Sometimes they'll turn a slightly different color, not brown. Maybe they'd be a bit of a yellow or a tinge, off color, and they'll fall. So you do have all these different signs that kind of tell you, hey, something's going on here. And in some cases, it's not something you can just look up. You'd have to actually get a professional. But yeah, there's some things like wilt that you can certainly detect and say, you know what, I need to check that soil before going out there and just putting water down. Let's check that soil and see if we have enough moisture in there first. Because if it's already wet, then it might be a secondary issue that you're not going to be able to detect yourself. You need a professional for.
Yes. I always wondered that, because I thought, man, by the time the tree's leaves are wilting, it must be way too late. But I'm glad to know that if it's true that they're wilting, you can water it and they bounce back.
They usually bounce back.
Yeah. So, but if they don't, then maybe you have a greater issue and it's time to call your arborist. But routine care and maintenance means you are having your arborist regularly. So I stopped you. So, maybe a regular checkup like a doctor, right?
Absolutely. That you hit it right on the head. That's what you want to be doing. You want to have a professional, your arborist, take a look at your trees. We'd say ideally at least once a year, but certainly if it's a new installation, you're probably looking at it maybe once a season. If it's really, really new, like, you might be looking at it every so many weeks. There's a lot of help from an arborist that can give you. There's certainly programs that they can provide to keep a close eye on plant material for insect pest diseases,
Yeah.
deficiencies like deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies, as well as things like making sure your moisture levels are adequate, making sure that the plant is actually able to transplant well and take to your new soils. That is what an arborist can provide for you. So normally, again, if it's no large mature tree, you want to be probably at least once a year, if not twice a year. And then again, newer installations, younger trees, you might be wanting to get on a program, every month, every other month, or something like that. So check with your local arborist.
Wonderful. That is great. Are there any other? I mean, we covered so much that's in the 5 to Thrive that are routine care. But do you feel like we missed anything, or did we cover it all?
I think we got all of them. We got the main ones, which is important. I think we don't want to. We want everybody to kind of grasp this, absorb this information, and be able to go and transfer it over to their landscapes and their trees.
Yeah, I'm looking at my backyard thinking, well, we just had rain. What else? I mean, I've got some pests, so I know I've got some care that's needed, but I have my great arborist already in the area, my Davey arborist who comes out regularly and keeps us above board with pests and diseases. So you guys will post a link to where you can contact your local arborist. Of course, if you're in the Long Island area, Frank is your guy, and his team may not be him, but you've got a big team there, I would have guessed.
We got a great team of folks here that are experts in this as well. So certainly you might see me, but you certainly see someone from my team come on out and give you a hand with your properties.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. We covered 5 to Thrive, and we hope that all of your trees will be thriving this summer, and they'll be not suffering from compacted soil, have healthy soil, be well mulched, but not volcano mulched, well watered, and just overall well maintained. Thanks to you, Frank. We really appreciate all of your tips and advice today.
Thank you, Katie, for having me. It's been a blast.
It has been fun. Now you enjoy that weather, get back outside, and I'll do the same. Now you guys are all released too, but we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. And before you guys are released, I have just wanted to remind you about our show next week. It's June 30th. Oh my goodness, the last day of June, if you can believe it. And reminder, we're here every Wednesday. And so on June 30th at 3 p.m. Eastern time, we'll welcome John Drasemski. I tried that last name, but I'll hone it by next Wednesday. And what we're going to be talking about is something we covered today is soil compaction. But we're really going to hone in on soil compaction and talk about protecting your trees during construction projects. A lot of us have done big home renovations, whether it be back patios or adding a bathroom, and we've had equipment and heavy things like piled on our lawns. And so John will join us to talk about if you're planning a project, how you can prevent tree damage, or if you've already done a project, how you can identify some of that damage. So that's June 30th at 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on Davey's Facebook page. You can RSVP to join us. And in the meantime, if you want some more helpful information, Davey has a blog. Davey has a great podcast called Talking Trees. And if you want to have an arborist on your property, please click the link to find one in your local area so they can come out and check your trees. Great. Thanks so much. This has been fun. Frank gave us so much great information. I hope you found it helpful. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.